There's several principles involved today. One is senior pastor ought to get a day off. Sort of. And our kids all came to town, so we weren't on the road. Thanksgiving's a big day, especially big for us with all of our grandchildren arrived. But there's a principle of Thanksgiving the day after or two, and that is that during the day of Thanksgiving, we probably overindulge with food and double desserts. Anybody not? Now, after a heavy meal and rich desserts, there's something implied about a sermon. It should be light and easy to digest. So a few thoughts today. Thanksgiving is a day of gratitude, and it had some observations, maybe because of our own circumstances in the Canal Valley this past few weeks. But Thanksgiving and gratitude started really in hard times. The Pilgrims, who, at least at probably one of the first Thanksgivings, had lost half of the 33 that came over on the Mayflower. Died of scurvy and other diseases. They spent the winter on the boat, crowded. They literally survived because there were two Native Americans who met them who spoke English. One had been imprisoned, had been captured as a slave, imprisoned in England by some slave traders and managed to escape and get back. And another, I'm not sure his history, but it was kind of interesting to show up and say how, and I would say, how are you? And it was those two who helped teach them how to farm and also negotiate with the local tribes there a peaceful coexistence. And after that hard winter, they came together to give thanks in the midst of difficulty. It's also interesting that the national holiday, Thanksgiving, was declared a national holiday by Abraham Lincoln during the pain of the Civil War. Not afterwards. It was not a time when it was out of abundance. We saw it again this weekend. Pepperdine University, do you see that in the paper? Opened up the gymnasium. There are places for people who had been displaced by the Woolsey Fire. Chico, near where our son and daughter-in-law live, the Catholic Church opened up the gymnasium there, and there's a picture in the paper of a 6-year-old little girl giving thanks to God for the Thanksgiving meal, and they all came together. It's a time where we come together as families when we can. I had kind of the joy of watching from up here. Last week you filled back boxes, right? The smiles on your faces coming back in when you're doing something for others and something around need. It was a sense of gratitude. And I think gratitude is born and comes out of need, not plenty. So we have an interesting text this morning. It's one from the Gospel of Luke. It only appears in Luke. So let's listen as we read in the 17th chapter about these 10 lepers. On the way to Jerusalem, Jesus was going through the region between Samaria and Galilee. And as he entered a village, 10 lepers approached him. Keeping their distance, they called out, saying, "Jesus, Master, have mercy on us." And when he saw them, he said to them, "Go and show yourselves to the priest." And as they went, they were made clean. Then one of them, when he saw that he was healed, turned back, praising God with a loud voice. He prostrated himself at Jesus' feet and thanked him. And he was a Samaritan. Then Jesus asked, "Were not 10 made clean? But the other 9, where are they? Was none of them found to return and give thanks to God except this foreigner?" Then he said to him, "Get up and go on your way. Your faith has made you well." A little background. Leprosy was one of the most dreaded diseases of the day. It's called Hansen's disease. Now, there's a wide variety of things that got called leprosy, including skin diseases like psoriasis and rough scaly patches and various other skin diseases. And when you had one, you were determined to be unclean. Now, the gatekeepers of all of this were the priests. Why they were the medical gatekeepers, I don't know. And they would judge whether this is temporary or permanent. But if you had a skin disorder, you were isolated socially and religiously. And then if you were healed, the priest was the one who said, okay, you can come back in and be part of society and whatever. True leprosy, which is referred to as Hansen's disease, was most dreaded. And you could have it for 30 years, and things like limbs would fall off in the process. And they were seen as unclean, as were others. And if they were healed, it was a miracle. But what they spent most of their time being was socially and medically isolated. Jesus tells them, which was very kosher in the proper way, go to the priest and validate your healing. And they did, 9 of them. Never to be heard from in scriptures again. But one came back. He doesn't wait to be certified, by the way. He comes back, very dramatic way, thanking Jesus, thanking God for what had happened. Now, just a side note. If you were there, what would you do with the other 9? I mean, there's a temptation to kind of unheal them, ungrateful people. Or maybe hit them with something worse. Maybe the grace in all of this is that's not the way Jesus treated them. But this person comes back and he says something more than just you're healed. This goes to a greater depth. That your faith has made you well. Well, raises lots of questions, doesn't it? I mean, when I get to heaven, assuming that happens, this is one of the fellows I want to look up. I want to know why he came back. I mean, it's kind of curious. And the others, why they didn't. Maybe they were caught up in their own good news. And maybe they got caught up in, I'm going back home. This is really great. They wanted what they got what they had wanted so desperately. Not to be so isolated in this isolated region, socially cut off. Maybe they didn't come back because by that point in time, Jesus was a marked man. Well, to be around him could be dangerous. But what about this guy who came back? We're told he's a foreigner. He's a Samaritan. Now, we read through the scriptures, the Good Samaritan, other stories. There comes another Samaritan hero. It's interesting Luke does that, but why would he come back? I mean, what's it about? I don't know. Maybe he knew the pain of exclusion. He had been cut off much of his life. Or maybe he decided not to go see the priest because he had enough of religious people. I mean, after all, he sent him there. Probably wouldn't be real inclined to feel warmly toward them. Or maybe he was filled with resentment. And he needed to let go of that for some reason. He needed more than just physical healing. We just don't know how the illness impacted him or what makes up his personality. What we know is that he looked at it and he came back and he wanted to be incredibly gracious and thankful to Jesus for what had happened. I think what brought him back was something more than leprosy. We can miss a lot when we get caught up on our own stuff, you know. This rhythm of faith and gratitude simply is what being Christian has been about for a long time, from the 1st century to the 21st century. 9 were so absorbed with the good fortune they had that they just didn't give a thought about its source. I had a professor in seminary who said maybe one of the big differences between Christians and those who don't profess the faith is that Christians know who to give thanks to. There may be some truth to that. So if I wanted to find out why I came back, probably the easiest thing would be for me to ask you, why do you come back? Why do you come back to church? What brings you here on Sunday mornings? A habit? Maybe. Guilt? I doubt it. Being with friends? That's a good thing to do. We always have our journey with friends. Or maybe there's just something about faith that we need. Speculating of the 10 who would be most likely to come back to be of help to others, who do you think it would be? I know where I put my money. It's the one who came back graciously. Many years ago, when I was in graduate school doing an MBA, I remember the first series of classes that was required, graduate level classes. It was marketing, and I remember the number 501. All 5 series were graduate classes. And the textbook was about that thick. And it was a marketing class for graduate students. And I remember someplace in the first paragraph or two, the author says, all of marketing is based on a basic principle that man, this is the 60s, okay, man has an insatiable desire to consume. In other words, we can never be fully satisfied buying stuff. We'll always want more. And I would suggest that gratitude is the counterbalance to that. That's what's in our 50-year story. It's about giving more than we get. We're a product of others. We are a product of people who invested their time and their energy and their finances in us. There is no self-made person in this congregation. And if you think so, let's have a conversation about that. I remember a few years back, one of our members who's now part of Light Shine was heading up the Christmas tree ornament, where you take a name and buy Christmas gifts for that family, which, by the way, is out there and ready for work. But that wasn't the big story. The big story was when she sat down, she said, when I was a child, that was how I got a Christmas present. Wow. Here she was, living in Westlake Village, very comfortably. When I was a child, it meant that much. And so what happens is she comes back to help support that kind of a tree. How do we get through the hard times? I think we go back to this Thanksgiving theme. I remember my cousin Betty, who had terminal cancer many, many years ago, writing a note. And she said, you know, the days are hard, but I take the good times when I can get them. And they were usually about 3 or 4 o'clock in the morning, and she'd watch the sun come up, and she would write these thank you notes to people and notes to people. She said, I take the moments that I can get. I give thanks for them. I'll take the good times when I can get them. it's more than just a positive attitude. It's an attitude of gratitude. It isn't about God gave me this illness. It's about the places in this that I can find to be grateful. I watched you last week fill the baskets for the shelter or for the LSS, and I watch some of you do shelter. In fact, I'm going to talk with Wes in Moment for Mission a little bit later. Out there sleeping on air mattresses, not because they're so comfortable. People working on Westminster Free Clinic. The Tuesday night program, one of the programs I really like, among others, is Manners Matter. Why do manners matter? Just to be sociable? No. It's how we validate someone else. The Serve Day. Bethlehem experience is more than nails and costumes, is it not? In a sense, it's our returning a sense of saying thank you. It's our gratitude. Observations over the holidays. Success without gratitude is hollow, and wealth without generosity is empty. And to get down, we did get our pledge card this week. Thanks for sending that to us. But stewardship is more than a budget. See, I think our DNA is built for gratitude. I'm so grateful to you at Westminster Church for all these years for your thankfulness and your gratitude and service and things that happen. I'm glad you came back. To use that from a biblical phrase. Not just to get what Jesus offers, but to respond to it. And so may this Advent season that we begin next week be filled with gratitude and faith. That our prayers, that we just pray for enough food for our table for the day, and shelter for the night, a friend to walk the journey with, and a place of worship and support. And may that be with you. Amen.